Hello everybody, Boulevard here. Welcome to Tournament War Room. I really wasn't sure how to handle this one, so basically we're just going to go through the winning deck lists of everybody who won a seasonal. That's UCG Baboom Timo from Asia, Mr. Bear from Southeast Asia, Petish in Europe, and Majin Bay in North America. I didn't full screen the camera because there's not really need for an intro. I don't have much to say. Let's get into it. So this is UCG Baboom Timo's list, and the Asia lists generally look a lot different than we expect them to. If you didn't actually get a chance to watch the previous Asian seasonal, when Go Hard was the dominant deck, the most popular deck in Asia's top 32 was actually this Fiora Aurelian Soul mid-range deck that I didn't see any other region playing. And while the deck lists were a lot more standardized this time, we do still get that cool tech we were expecting because, yes, you are seeing that right. That is a Dragon's Rage in the main deck of Baboom Timo, and it's one of those cards where when you look at it and you think about it, it actually looks really good because Lee Sin mirrors were pretty abundant. I think Asia, I don't have the numbers, unfortunately, of what was played to what degree. I really only have those for North America, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if the Lee Sin to Twisted Fate Fizz ratio was either in the favor of Lee Sin or at least extremely close. Asia loves their Lee Sin, and Dragon's Rage looks like a total mirror breaker, either baiting important resources out of your opponent on your off Lee Sin turn, or just going for that last bit of push that you need, and they're still going to have enough mana left over to fight for it. Overall, I really like the tech. I just don't know how much it's relevant going to be, you know, kind of going forward into the Shurima meta, but this is the Zoe Lee Sin list used from Baboom Timo. And just going to quickly sort of get out of the way, Baboom Timo played TF Fizz as you kind of expect most seasonal winners to. I think Mr. Bear was actually the only one that didn't run it, but I'll confirm that as we get later on in the video. But there was a one of Black Market Merchant in this list, which seems a little weird to me. I could definitely see its usefulness if you were planning on playing the mirror, but I think you should be banning the mirror, and I haven't actually finished doing the Asia cast yet, so I'm not sure what UCG Baboom Timo's ban strategy was, but, you know, more or less outside of that and the jury rig, this is a fairly standard list. Worth noting he's only playing one Mind Meld because I believe two of our winners were actually on 2 copies of that card, but yeah, this is just, he played TF Fizz. Now, for the most part, I was expecting a lot of lineups to be TF Fizz and an Aphelios deck and then some other kind of Targon deck. Generally, Lee Sin. I thought Lee Sin was pretty well poised to, you know, make a big impact. And, you know, at least for Asia, that's definitely going to be the case. They love Lee Sin. But this is just, you know, sort of a good old-fashioned Invoke deck. It's a little bit different than you might expect. I mean, there's Behold the Infinite in the main deck. As I had mentioned, like, the random one-offs in the Asian lists are always just kind of an eye-opener, like the one-off Black Market Merchant, now the one of Behold the Infinite, the one of Dragon Rage from the Lee Sin deck. But outside of that, this looks pretty similar to, if you're familiar with the North American tournament scene, this is pretty similar to what Am I has been playing, or Peps Cola, if you're used to the European scene a little bit more. You know, nothing too spicy here. Invoke, definitely a deck that I didn't think was going to be able to pick up a win at a seasonal. I just really wasn't confident in this style of deck. I like it a lot, but I don't know, it just didn't feel as powerful as some of the other things in the meta, but hey, worked out for Baboom Timo and got the win with this Invoke. Then we get into Mr. Bear's decks from Southeast Asia who did not play Twisted Fate Fizz, electing instead for the Twisted Fate Aphelios. I would imagine this got banned more often than not, but once again, didn't get a chance to watch the Southeast Asia broadcast. There's been a lot going on over the last couple of days for me since the NA seasonal ended, so I haven't unfortunately been able to like take in all of the VODs, and then with Shurima dropping pretty immediately, I don't know if I'm going to be able to, at least in a timely fashion, but this is TF Aphelios, or yeah, TF Aphelios. I'm so used to saying that mistakenly that, you know, actually seeing the deck list in front of me is a little bit weird, but it was the TF deck he played. It was the Aphelios deck he played. Probably didn't get to play it too often, but the other lists that he brought were very interesting. So then we get on over to Zoe Karma. Not Lee Sin, Zoe Karma. This is what Mr. Bear decided to bring to the seasonal, and it worked out. Now, Zoe Karma is a deck that we've actually seen before. It was even on my tier list for a while, but it just didn't seem to be doing enough against the Invoke-heavy meta that it found itself in. The last time I saw this was in sort of the Draven Ezreal, Targon Plaza kind of meta, and it basically just never beat the Invoke decks at the time. They always seem to outvalue it, get down, you know, Aurelian Soul or what have you, and start to run away with the game. But now that we've gone into this more Aphelios-centric meta, we even see the 3 Nopify here. I would imagine that played a big part in denying opposing Aphelios guns. And Homecoming, another big card that came up this weekend. We'll see it more in the NA list a little bit later on. This started popping up as like the NA Lee Sin tech, but, you know, Bear brought it here. Not a whole lot in terms of like incredible value for doubling up the Karma. Like, deny obviously makes your deny undeniable, but that's kind of whatever. Nopify, again, kind of whatever. Hush, really not doing anything. I think that, like, getting 2 guns off Gifts from Beyond and then having the ability to, like, double up your gun, for example, you have a Karma out, but I mean, like, at that stage of the game, how much does it matter, right? Where it's turn 10, obviously you're not going to be crescendoming into Eye of the Dragon on turn 10, probably. It's almost certainly going to be a totally different board state, and you either need to, like, double lifesteal or double overwhelm. And you don't have that consistent gun generation that you would with something like an Aphelios. And I think every time I watch this deck in action, the Zoe was leveled, and that was, like, the main win con. But, I mean, if you're looking for a Karma control deck, I would definitely recommend this over Spooky Karma. Not sure how it does against TF Fizz. I don't know if that was Bear's ban strategy. Based on the looks of this deck, I wouldn't imagine it beats TF Fizz. So, you know, maybe just, I'm like trying to give you advice on how to run this deck when like a new set drops in 2 days. Let me just continue to like go over these rather than be like, here's how you should run this in the next event, because obviously too much is changing. That's right, baby. Nightfall Aggro won a seasonal tournament. The Flight was in it as well. I've been talking up the Flight for a little bit. You know, I'm not the biggest Nightfall fan. I don't think I've ever pretended to like this deck. Atrocity is some, like, if you're going to play Nightfall, I kind of demand that you have Atrocity in it. So it was nice to see that we're not on, like, the Cygnus, the Moonstalker win con. We are back on the Atrocity. And a list like this does make me think that you would be looking to pick on the TF Fizz, but, you know, this is just a good anti-aggro deck as well, and I think Zoe Karma is probably going to fill a similar vein of just, like, being a good anti-aggro deck. So, you know, we had mentioned that Southeast Asia was super aggro-heavy, and then Europe was a little bit less aggro-heavy because they watched SEA, and then NA was even less aggro-heavy because they watched EU, so it's possible that Bear came into this thinking that there was still going to be a massive aggro representation in the top 32, and Nightfall always kind of has the moniker of this is the anti-aggro deck, so maybe that's how it worked out. But hey, you know, if you're ever arguing with your friends and they're like, oh, Nightfall sucks, be like, ooh, bad news, bud, won a seasonal. This is Petish's Burble deck. It's, if I remember correctly, so like the sort of standard list is take this, -1 Mind Meld, +1 Get Excited. That good old 13 3-ofs and 1 1-of, but instead we went with 2 Mind Meld. And I talked about this a little bit on broadcast because Majin Bay also ran 2 Mind Meld. Running 2 of that card lets you pick a card on defensive turns, like, or pick a card rather on offensive turns going into defensive turns, because if you end up discarding your Mind Meld, it's not the end of the world. You actually have the backup, and we even saw that come up really big for Majin Bay in the finals of North America. So yeah, you know, 2 Mind Meld, cool. And I do think that TF is still going to be very prominent in the meta. I don't think this deck's going anywhere. So if you're wondering why 2 Mind Meld, I think that is the biggest reason, is it lets you have a little bit of peace of mind when you are aggressively pick a carding. As Draven really doesn't look any different than it did when it was a meta-relevant deck. I think I've mentioned a lot of times before, I'm not the biggest fan of this deck. Scorched Earth isn't bad because we're in a very landmark-heavy meta, or we were, rather, as we're going into Shreema tomorrow. Ravenous Flock I don't think gets a lot of value, but I do think that Tribeam Improbulator does, and I am a little surprised that these players never went down to, like, 2 Ravenous Flock, but they're the ones playing it, not me. They probably found themselves in a lot of situations where it was unexpectedly getting value. No House Spider in this list, you may have noticed, just making way for a little bit more removal, like, you know, fitting in additional Static Shocks, staying up on 2 Scorched Earth, and all that kind of good stuff. So, yeah, Draven, Ezreal, it is what it is. And then this is the list you've been waiting for, Aphelios Victor. I remember talking about what I would have been running into the seasonal, and I kept talking up this Aphelios PNZ deck, and it really didn't show up in North America. Macon Jackson was the only player that brought it from the Swiss portion into the top 32, and then I think there were 2 of them in the top 32, at least for NA as well. And I kept talking about, you know, this looks like the perfect Victor deck, and it's just a damn shame that Victor doesn't fit into this. And you would think if Victor isn't fitting into Aphelios PNZ, Victor's just not fitting into any deck. And it looks like Petish said, actually, you know what? I think Victor does fit into this deck. Now, I only got to watch the finals, and in the finals, this deck did end up getting banned, probably because it was the Aphelios deck, not really the Victor side. From what I've heard from other players, the Victor really didn't come up that often, but Victor won a seasonal, and that's a stat that you get to throw out for the rest of time. That's cool. And then we're going to round it out with Majin Bay's Burblefish. This one looks a little bit different. You know, we go down on like Poro Cannon and Suit Up and Mystic Shot, and we throw in some Zonites and Aftershock, that second copy of Mind Meld. Zonite Urchin popped up in a lot of lists, especially in North America. I don't think it's necessary. I think it's better than Pool Shark. That much I will say, especially because a lot of times you end up clunked up on stress testings and you don't really know what to do with them. And Zonite just helps you facilitate that cycle, as well as getting another immediate draw for your Twisted Fate level. Definitely like the Zonite more than I like the Pool Shark, but I'm still I'm still a proponent of just the Ballistic Bot, Zap, Wiggly, Burblefish, just 9 follower style of this deck. But, you know, this is probably what you're going to be seeing net decked a lot on ladder day 1 of the Shreema expansion, so that is what it is. Now, this is what I just mentioned a little bit earlier with that homecoming tech in these Lee Sin lists out of North America. Players were really just looking for the versatility that the bounce offered, as well as you expected to run into some Lee Sin mirrors because there were, I think, 12 of them coming into the top cut. It was like the third highest represented deck coming out of Swiss for North America, and homecoming just looked like it did a decent amount of work in the mirror, just being able to reset that Lee Sin, or even in a wider spread of matchups, being able to either reset a Twisted Fate counter, because sometimes your opponent pick a cards and you're playing Lee Sin and you're like, well, my next attack turn I can kill it, but they might get to draw some more cards before then. Just reset the Twisted Fate. It doesn't feel good, but if you're killing it on the next turn, you'd rather it not level, and that just kind of is what it is. But also resetting Veiled Temple units. Veiled Temple, as you saw here, showed up in a lot of different decks, and just being able to reset the stats on the 15-15 Aphelios and get it back down to a 3-3, I think is something that a lot of players found extremely appealing. And it's just a little bit better than a stun in a lot of scenarios, because there are a lot of mana-efficient targets for homecoming in the game right now, and in a pinch, you can even bounce your own Veiled Temple. Right? Okay, yeah, I had to read it to make sure, because it never came up in that regard, but yeah, I was a pretty big fan of this Lee Sin list. Now, you may have remembered that during Tournament Tactician, I had said that I thought Tahm Kench was going to win the North American Seasonal, and I was right on that. What I was wrong on was that more players would pick up on this. I thought that when we saw this list out of Kevor coming into top 32, I thought this was, the lineup. This Aphelios, Tahm Kench, Zoe Lee Sin, and Twisted Fate Fizz. I thought, that's an insane-looking lineup. A lot of players should be net decking this, especially given that, we had 13 Aphelios Bilgewater in the top cut. It was like 4 Diana, a couple Zoe, 4 Twisted Fate, and then the 1 Tahm Kench. We get into top 32, and Majin Bay is the only player besides Kevor who swapped over to the Tahm Kench, and that boggled my mind. I thought that, looking at this from an analytical standpoint, this seemed like the mirror breaker. This seemed like it really fixed the lineup problems that a lot of players were having with this, and it's arguable between Tahm Kench and Diana. I will give you that. I think that Tom is better, but I can see how they both sort of fulfill the same role. But I was blown away that more players didn't jump on this. I saw a lot of value in this immediately. I made the call. Majin Bay won the tournament with it, so I guess I was right. But I really expected more players to jump in on this, and I'm kind of hoping that going forward, players will be able to more easily identify the sort of broken concepts coming out of Swiss and be able to adjust their top 32 decks accordingly, because there should have been more Tahm Kench in top 32. We went from 2 qualifying with Kevor's Tahm Kench Aphelios and 1 Star Spring player to Majin Bay being the only one to add this into his lineup, and deserved the win because of that. But outside of that, yeah, this is just an Aphelios Bilgewater deck. Aphelios, of course, just caught the nerf down to 2 HP, but I don't know how much that's going to affect his play rate or win rate, since you play the protection spells and things like that anyway. A lot of players look like they're experimenting with Shurima. That doesn't have as much removal, but that's a problem for tomorrow. And that is going to do it for me today. Well, thank you for watching Tournament War Room. These have been the deck lists. I'll probably end up linking somewhere on Twitter or something. Follow my Twitter from the BLVD. Just a list of all of these in Mobilytics form on a spreadsheet. Unfortunately, I can't do it now because I have to go get ready for the cast for the Asia Seasonal, which will continue to be up on this channel this week. I know everything's a little bit of a day late. We ran into some problems yesterday during the broadcast of the top 32 of the Seasonal, and there were problems on our end, and then there were actual problems with the VOD on Riot's end, and it was a whole mess, but it will still be up on this channel. I'm probably not even going to spread it out over multiple days. I think I'm just going to dump it all at once in a playlist, and if you guys are interested in checking that out, then by all means, myself and Shit Just Works will be casting that, and that'll be up either tomorrow or Thursday. So, that's going to do it for me. Excited for Shurima tomorrow. Excited for the OLS this weekend. Unfortunately, going to have to be North America only, as they have disabled Cross Shard for friend challenges, and we don't really have the prize pool to split it between a North America. We don't have the prize pool, and we don't have the time and manpower to split it between a North America OLS and an EU OLS. So unfortunately, is a North America only until they get the Cross Shard friend stuff fixed. But if you have an NA account, you are by all means welcome to play. You don't have to be North American. You just have to have an account on the Shard. So anyway, that's gonna do it for me. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Boulevard, and as always, good luck in your tournament.